Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome, everybody. Welcome to my studio where today we are going to paint this beautiful Harris Hawk reference photo up in the upper right-hand corner. And if you want to see some other reference photos like this, I got this one from a site called PMP Art. It's a place where artists can go and meet and share photos and tips and tricks and artwork and try to help everybody get a little bit better. I am using a little bit of yellow here. This is a mixture of gamboge and hensa yellow here to paint part of the beak of this bird. And I'm just jumping in and going with this. And while I'm doing that, I'm gonna get to the actual beak out there in a second. That's gonna be a bit of Payne's gray and a little bit of burnt umber. Here we go. So while I'm doing that, let me tell you about the tools and supplies that I'm using. That brush that I have in my hand right there is a King Art paintbrush. It's part of the 90-20 series, a series of pointed round brushes. I've been using these brushes for a couple of years now, and I very much like them. They're a synthetic hair brush. The water comes off of them very nicely. They hold a fair amount of water, and they feel good in your hand. I don't think you can ask for too much more than that. The paints that I'm using today are the paints that I have grown to love so much. These are my M-gram paints. I'll talk about the colors that I'm using as I'm going along. I've been using M-gram paints for about 15 years now, and they are absolutely lovely. The paper that I'm using is Arches, cold pressed, 300-pound paper. I don't normally use 300-pound paper, but I happen to have a large sheet of it, and I've cut it down. You can see a couple of the edges here have a little decaling on them. That was the outside of the sheet of paper, and a couple of the edges are hard cut, and that's what I've done myself. It's actually lovely paper. If I could afford to use nothing but this, I probably would, but it's a little pricey. That's all right. Okay, so now painting the head and the body of this bird, I guess down to his neck anyways. I'm going to be using basically 3 colors, and you'll see me mix those in as we go along. The 3 colors that I'm using in the body of this bird are burnt umber, sepia, and yellow ochre. I've had those 3 colors on my palette for a long time, and in the right proportions, they work very nicely together. There's a little sepia. And what I'm hoping to do on the body of this bird, on the head of this bird, is to just make some nice mottled colors. I don't want anything other than a base layer of paint on here, so you'll see me just jab some color on here. However, I want to get some color on here, maybe start to get some interest from some darker areas and some lighter areas, some areas with a slightly different bit of color to them. The only thing I'm really hoping to do, other than get some, basic color on here, is to set myself up for the next layer by adding a few areas that maybe have a little dark to them and a few areas that have a little light to them. You will see later on in this video those areas will be where I put in the feathers on this bird. Oh, look, it looks a mess, but it's fantastic. It looks wonderful. Looks wonderful. Right here, I kind of thought to myself, I need to put in some dark areas kind of along the lines that this bird's head goes, or his feathers go. Not sure that I really need that, but you'll see how I handle it later on. All right, and we're going to let the rest of the head dry. We're going to move back up to the beak here. There we go, and adding a little extra Payne's gray. A lot of Payne's gray in the beak. Maybe a little bit of black later on down at the tip of this beak. The tip of this, right on cue. I'm going to paint a little bit of that. The tip of this is pretty dark, so I do add just a little bit of black in there to darken it up. There's a lot of Payne's gray, and there's probably even just a little bit of sepia in that Payne's gray also. There we are. So if I'm doing a little, yeah, there's my reference photo right there. If I'm doing a small area like that beak right there, I always feel as though I can do that wet into dry and develop that whole wet area. If I'm doing a larger area like the body of the bird, usually I'll do a mixture of wet into dry and wet into wet, or I try to anyways. Putting some dark around this eye, trying to set that off a little bit. The eye on this I always think is a little odd. I think I drew it just a bit too big. There must be a hair on my page. The eye, I think, is just a little bit too big, and I struggle with this eye. You'll see me struggle with it throughout the painting. Now, here, what I'm trying to do is set up the eye where he's got like that brow that hangs over his eye a little bit. I want to start to build up a little shadow area underneath that brow. You'll see me do that on the front side of that eye. You'll see me do it on the back side of that eye. I just want to make sure that makes such a dramatic area, and you can see the eye there. Here I'm just putting in a little, this is actually a bit of gamboge, a little bit of yellow ochre to set off the mouth area there as it comes out to the rest of his beak. I do turn my page quite a lot. There you go. Yeah, you can see what I'm doing. I do turn my page quite a lot. It's just easier for me to turn my page rather than to try to contort my hand around. Lots of times I try to contort my hands around. I still don't get it in the right spot. So I just turn my page. I do apologize if that takes away from anybody's viewing of this. Yeah, see, right in front of that eye, right behind that eye, trying to darken that up, make that a much more dramatic space in there. Yep. Got a little bit of shadow underneath here too. Let's just extend that kind of around. Lovely. Lovely, lovely. And again, that to me looks like that is just burnt umber going on there, but trying to build up a few layers here and there of color. Again, the beauty of watercolor is you can put on a lot of light layers and you get kind of a translucence, just a transparency that you don't get with other mediums, and you can allow quite a bit of light and energy to come through what you're doing. So I used to not always put on a whole lot of light layers. It looks like this little bit here maybe isn't quite as light as it should be, but I'll pull that out a little bit and blend that down. But trying to add a lot of lighter layers to lend it some of that luminosity, some of that ethereal quality that we all like in watercolors. And you'll see by the end of this video that this bird really has a really nice watercolory look to it. Something that I really enjoy seeing. I'm trying to do much more of, be less literal, be more watercolory, and make it an art piece rather than a depiction of something that I've seen. So we're a little over 10 minutes into this. I do want to ask anybody who's watching, I've sped this video up. Obviously, I don't paint this quickly. And I just want to ask everybody, and you can leave a comment down below, is this something that you're okay with watching, or would you rather me maybe cut out some of the painting, show you the more interesting parts, but do it at a normal speed? And would you rather I broke in with some commentary here and there and let the painting speak for itself? I'm just curious what everybody else likes to see or hear or interact with. I've tried to let the painting do the talking in a lot of my videos, but I realize that might not be what everybody likes, and I'm always willing to change and get better, but I would like to ask what everybody likes. All right, so just redarkening a little color here, right? Strengthening it a little bit. Again, small increments, right? Small increments. Let's leave some of that light shining through. That's a beautiful little nose bit there. I'm not up on my animal physiology, so I don't know exactly what that's called, but it's got his nostril there, so I'll call that his nose rather than his beak. So here, I want to make sure that his lower beak is a little bit different than the beak on the upper side without making it like super dark. So I've just added a touch of blue to it. It's going to change that color temperature just ever so much and should allow visually for a difference between the two bits of his beak. And then right at the bottom here, that little bit that just went on, that was sepia. And that should give some dimension to that bottom beak and allow it to be slightly different color. Yeah, I'm going to come back to this eye quite a lot. You know, I'm going to come back to it. I think it's too big. I think I should have made it smaller. That eye. Okay, well, I think it's time we, look at some bigger areas here. So I want to start defining the feathers on this guy, but not individual feathers. I want to do it as a group, or I guess redefining the shape of this guy. So I'll put on that so I get that nice hard edge, and then I'm going to come back and add some nice wet into wet everywhere else. And let those colors run together a little bit. I've got a dark spot right above that brow ridge right there. Yeah, I'm going to accentuate that. Like almost like he's frowning and looking down at something. The further this painting goes, I'm going to darken that up a bit more. I really like that. Yeah, still messing with the eye. You put a little shadow around that yellow on his eye there. It's in a bit of darkness, right? It gives it a bit more dimensionality. There it is. Actually does make it look better. All right, all right. I think we need to spend a lot of time working on that eye, right? The things that are going to draw the viewer's eye to the painting, we need to spend a lot of time on. And we like to look at eyes. We really are drawn to the eye of this bird. And so, that being the most important thing, we need to spend a little time to make it. It doesn't have to be realistic. It's just got to be dramatic. It's got to be eye-popping, we could say. It's got to be something that stands out. And I think we're gonna get there with this one. Or well, I know we're gonna get there with this one. It's just gonna take a little bit. So, like I said, I'm trying to make this pretty dramatic and dark underneath there. Yeah, now you're starting to see that brow that's on this bird really is causing a dark shadow in there. And I'm just going to continue with lots of really light layers in here. Lots of light layers. Got to go with lots of light layers. It takes a little longer to paint, but it's not a competition to see who can do it the fastest. All right, so underneath this chin here, we need to put some dark. This is sepia going in here. There we are. It's dark underneath there, and then this a little bit right next to that is some yellow ochre. But that's going to get another layer of paint on that, but it's got to be dark underneath there. It's got to look like it's pushed back and in a shadow. We need that. Redarkening a little bit of his beak here. So I could either darken the top or darken the bottom, but not both. So it looks like I've decided to do a little bit on the top there. Still playing with that eye. Yeah, I like that brow ridge. I like the brow ridge. I need to get some feathers on the top of his head. Okay, so I painted his eye that red color, kind of a rust color. This is an extenuation of that. So this color is a little bit of maroon perylene with a little bit of burnt umber mixed in with it. It does give it a nice red color. I didn't want it to be too red because, if I make it too red, it's going to look like he's an evil bird. He's not an evil bird. He's just got a strangely colored eye. I guess maybe not strange if you're a bird, but I think could have been a slightly different color and just as effective. There we go. A little something around his nostril to make that stand out a little bit there. Without taking up too much of the rest of the color that's on there. I like the little light spot that's just behind his nostril. I think that works really well. He's got a couple of feathers that stick out here. Just a few. We're going to drop those in. All right. This is definitely sepia here, and then a little bit of burnt umber to go with it. And I'm just going to blend that out. Start building up some of these areas where there's some interest and color. Right, and this is where I can really start to take artistic license on my own. I don't feel like I have to be a slave to what the rest of this bird looks like. The bird has given me this lovely shape to start with. All right, I've got the general form of this bird, and then I'm going to pull from that the idea that this bird would look like something in watercolor and not necessarily in real life. So in my world, when I look at this bird, it looks more like this than it does the reference photo there. Yep, so just this, again, this is a mixture of burnt umber and sepia. Now, I guess not everybody thinks that these would necessarily go together, but they do. They model up real nicely. And that sepia allows for a few darker areas in there, a few shadowy areas, and the burnt umber allows for a little bit warmer, closer area. And then you can see in there, I don't want to cover up all of those light areas. I've got some, you can see there are some darker areas, there's some lighter areas. I want to keep those and let the water flow and the paint flow with it. Give it so much interest. Give it a lot of interest. I do, I'm looking at this with my hands. I do talk to myself quite a bit when I paint. And I do try to step back and think about what I'm doing before I dive in with the next thing that I do. Oh, I'm going back to my eye again. I got the idea that if I just extended the black all the way around his eye, that it would fix it. It would make it, slightly smaller. I'm not exactly sure if I'm successful with that. I'm not exactly sure if that's a truism or not. But that was my thought in doing that. And up here, again, I want to leave it watery and loose, and have some interest on there. Yeah, so down here, yep, I'm going to follow the chin line, I guess I would call it, of this bird. Drop some water in, do a little bit more. You can do a little bit looser painting. Obviously, a little wet in wet, so I want to make sure I incorporate some wet in wet technique here. I don't really want any hard edges, but I do want to try to give some indication of the underlying structure of this bird, the shape of his head, as opposed to just having a giant field where it's all just modeled. Right? Yeah, it's got to be darker underneath there. Really dark under there. Good, good, good. And as I'm putting these darks on, I'm telling myself, don't just plow over the lighter areas. We have to let some of that light shine through. So working very hard to leave some of that light in there. Now, all of these dark areas that are here, including the ones I just put on, these are going to be the basis for a number of feathers that you'll see. We're gonna do kind of some negative painting on these feathers. It's an effect I think is fantastic. I think it adds a lot of interest and stays with the basic theme of letting the water be the water and having that interest there rather than being literal about everything. Trying to get away from, especially with a subject like this, trying to get away from being quite as literal as making a copy of it, like I've said before. I think I do a pretty good job with that. All right, so where we're at right now, I think, is a pretty good spot to be in. I like the beak, maybe a little bit more work on the beak. Definitely some more work on the eye, and then we need to add some feathers. So, where do we start with? I think we're going to start with the eye, and in order to help myself with the eye, I'm taking quite a bit of help from the reference photo, he's got a big shadow that comes over his eye, and that's from that brow that hangs over that little bit. So I'm purposely going to put in a big shadow on his eye, and I'm going to make sure that you can see it. And then here's that little dimple in his brow. I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to accentuate that a little bit. I want that to look like it's forcing his brow down, like he's in some kind of bad mood or something. A little bit darker underneath his chin. Like I said, a lot of this is sepia, but you can still see that ochre shining through. I'm trying not to just plow on a whole bunch of sepia and overtake everything. Trying to just darken up a few areas where it needs to be darker and letting everything else be. A lot of water to let the paint just flow everywhere. And as it flows towards the end of that water, I'm trying hard not to create a hard edge. All right, now here's the exciting part. I'm just looking to see where there's a feather hiding out in there. And I'm going to put in a little bit of color, a little bit of extra color on the darker areas to pull out those feathers a little bit. All right, the lighter areas are going to become the feathers. The darker areas will be something behind those feathers. Yep. And quick as that, there's a feather, there's a feather. Got a couple up here. And if we extend those lines, it kind of makes it look like that feather goes way up. And it's just pulling out of those darker areas something that looks feather-ish. It doesn't have to be perfect. Not looking for an exact feather, not looking for an exact size of a feather even. Just kind of putting on something that's going to give the indication like there's a feather there. All right, here's one right there. Just pull that out. Quick as that. And blend out that bottom side. Then we're not taking over the whole photo. Or painting. We're not taking over anything. We're letting the painting be the painting. We're not taking away from any of that watercolory goodness of the painting. We're just suggesting that right there might be a feather hanging out right there. And we're adding that little bit of interest to the painting that maybe it didn't have before. Here's another feather right there. Just pull them out of the air. Yep, there it is. I can see it. And there it is. And without doing much of anything, without taking away from the painting, and then you can blend a lot of it out almost to nothing. There you go. Look, all of a sudden we've got a few feathers in there, quick as that, and we didn't do anything, right? Feathers oftentimes, this is what I'm doing here, oftentimes have a little bit of a crack in them. Not all of the feathers are perfect feathers. So if you add a little notch in it here and there, everybody knows what it is. Yeah, right up, just adding a little bit. Now you can add a lot to this, and you can do probably more than you want, and you're going to end up with something that has a lot of lines and a lot of areas. The key is once you start seeing these feathers, only doing certain feathers, right? You probably don't want to do too many, but you want to do a few. Back to the eye. Back to the eye. This eye is going to be the death of me. No, it's not really going to be the death of me. The eye actually turns out good in the end. I like it very much, but a little bit in the middle where that eye kind of just didn't look like I wanted it to. All right. At this point, we're just touching up those few areas where there might be a little bit more to do, a little bit extra detail that can go in somewhere. Adding a little bit of extra shadow here on his lip or his mouth. Adding a shadow onto his eye. I've got a shadow on the eye itself. I need to have that shadow extend right around that eye. A little darker. There we go. All right. Now, do I need to do anything underneath? I'm looking at this going, what else do I need to do on this? What else do I need to do? I don't know. This is the part of the painting where you're so close to the end and you want to say, I don't want to touch it. I don't want to do anything else, because if I do, I'll likely mess something up. But you know there's something that needs to get done in here. For me, it's adding another layer and keeping that area underneath his chin nice and dark. So you can see I'm just putting a little paint on, and then I'm letting the water pull it out as it wants to come out. Trying not to do too much with it. I think that looks really good. And then I'm going to add some other color on here. Now I have to be careful not to blend this out too far and go over any of those feathers that I've previously painted. If I do, I might have to come back and repaint some of those. Let's see. More on the eye going on here. Could actually be a bit darker, a bit bluer in there. There we go. Just add just a little bit of color. That'll push it back. That burnt umber is a bit warm, and it probably needs to be just a slightly cooler temperature in there. And one of the things I've noticed that really seems to work is where there's a shadow, I can just kind of paint a light layer over everything that's kind of in shadow, and it seems to work to unify everything. What I'm talking about is there was a hard line between the eye and that area around the eye and the feathers behind it. If I just kind of go over them all real nicely, real simply, then it helps to blend everything together. A little Payne's gray on the eyeball here, right on his pupil. I'm painting the whole thing, and we'll come back in a second with some white gouache for a highlight on there, but just getting the color on there. Yeah, he's looking at you. He's looking mean now. You get that pupil on there, you can set the mood a little bit with that pupil. Somehow he looks a little bit less happy at the moment than he did a minute ago. And a little bit more black, trying to make that a bit more dramatic. That's definitely a dramatic eye. Maybe I didn't make it too big. Maybe it's kind of nice. Let's get that pupil just the right bit of roundness. So we're getting close to the end now. And you can see kind of the method in my madness. I used that hawk head as a reference point, but I wasn't a slave to it. I wanted to keep it watercolory-y. And I think I've done that. There's a little bit of black on the front of that beak, just to darken it up. That's really dark if you look at that reference photo. And just blend that all the way out. This is a small little brush. There it is. Yeah, I'm looking at where do I put those highlights? They've got to be there somewhere. They have to be there somewhere. So, as we come to the end, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's hung with me. I really enjoyed painting this. Hope you all enjoyed seeing me paint this. If you have any comments about it, please leave them down below. Love to hear from everybody. I'm redoing that shadow, just making that shadow a bit darker in there, a bit more dramatic. If there's something you'd like to see me paint or attempt to paint, put it down in the comments. I'm always up for a good challenge. I'm not saying I'm going to paint it, but I'm up for a challenge. Most of the challenges I take, I revel in them. It's always fun to attempt something new. Maybe it'll be something I haven't thought about before. Also, I've got links down below to my Discord channel. I've got a nice little community on my Discord channel of watercolor artists. I post a monthly challenge that you could get involved with, and a number of us do partake in that and have some fun with a monthly challenge. And you can see how you do it in comparison to everybody else who's joined that channel. And with that, I think we are done with this bird. I would like to take a moment to thank everybody. There we go, signature, last thing. I would like to take a moment to thank everybody. Very much enjoy painting and enjoy painting with people. And you can join me on Wednesday nights. I do a live stream every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific. Would love to see everybody there. We have a nice group. And there it is. There's the final painting. So with that, everybody, thank you so much. Bye-bye.